looks. Hi everyone, Abel Cunningham, Bigfoot scientist. So I'm doing another video where I'm going to read witness accounts. One of the things that I discovered in making these videos, despite all the scientific evidence that I have documented of Bigfoot activity, there's just some people who will never be convinced without finding a body of one of these creatures. And part of me thinks that even if you found a body, there are people who wouldn't believe it. They would say it was a hoax or something like that. So anyways, I'm not gonna totally give up on the research part of it. We'll still film some videos as we come across evidence of Bigfoot in the woods, but we're gonna do more of these witness stories that I've been getting through my website, my email. So the one I'm going to share with you today is a little bit longer, but it's super interesting. Comes from a woman named Alice. Now Alice gave me permission to use her first name, but not her last name. She's a school teacher, and totally get it. Kids can be mean. I'm not even going to tell you all the nicknames we made up for our teachers in grade school. So I can only imagine, what sort of things the kids would put you through if they knew you were out there witnessing Bigfoot. So I do appreciate the story, Alice. Regardless, it takes a lot of bravery, courage to submit stories like this. So here goes. And I think you'll see, Alice says she's a school teacher. I think that'll be evident as I start to read the email. It's probably one of the most well-written stories I've seen so far. So here goes. Dear Abel, thank you so much for your work in the field. It's great to see a Bigfoot researcher who uses science and common sense. We could use more like you. Thanks, Alice. I appreciate it. There are a lot of people in this field who seem to be lacking those two things: the scientific background and the common sense. So glad you picked up on that in some of my previous videos. Wanted to share an experience from my childhood in New Hampshire that you may be interested in. Growing up, my grandfather and I were very close. He lived just down the road from me, and I used to often ride my bike over to his house to play checkers, work in his garden, or just watch TV. He would always make the best chocolate milkshakes. It sounds like fun. Anyway, I was in about 5th or 6th grade. Gramps started to decline a little bit mentally. I'm not sure if it was an actual disease, or just old age, or maybe just he'd been a heavy drinker his whole life. He was still functional and wasn't drooling in his lap or anything, but you could definitely see the change. Yeah, I'm sorry to hear that, Alice. It's certainly never fun to see a loved one go through that, and I can only imagine what it was like. So again, appreciate you sharing not only your experience, but just some of the emotional connection through your childhood. Back to the email. It was around this time that he took up wood carving, or chainsaw carving. I'm not really sure what you call it. He was making those big wooden bears that people carve out of tree trunks. Yeah, I see those all the time around here on the side of the road. Of course, the problem is he wasn't very good at it. They didn't look like bears at all. Of course, no one in the family had the heart to tell him this, least of all me. We've all been there before too, with a loved one who has some sort of crazy hobby that everyone's afraid to tell them they're not very good at. He had these things all around his yard with a big for sale sign out front, but no one was buying them. Probably no one even knew what they were supposed to be. After a few months, some of the statues he carved started disappearing in the middle of the night. He was furious that someone was stealing his artwork. The rest of us were just confused as to why someone would want to steal these monstrosities. Not to mention, each one must have weighed a couple 100 pounds. Yeah, those things are made out of a solid tree trunk. They've got to be, pretty heavy. This was well before security cameras were available, so Gramps decided to stay up at night with the spotlight he used to shine for deer, waiting for the thief to come by. He stayed up for a few nights in a row before something happened. The next morning, he was convinced that it wasn't a person at all that was stealing his artwork. It was a giant hairy ape, as he called it. He said that he was lucky the moon was out that night because it moved so silently he wouldn't have even heard it come in the yard. I know that's true. I've had these things come right up behind me, and you don't even know they're there until you catch a whiff of them. Anyway, he said the thing picked up the carving as if it was as light as a football and bounded off into the woods. Of course, no one believed him at the time. Who would? We already knew he was slowly losing his marbles, and this just made us think he had lost them all at once. But this is where the story gets crazy. Gramps was a World War II vet and had seen combat in the Pacific. My grandfather was too. That's interesting. He was also a hunter his whole life, and was a crack shot with a rifle, even into his old age. He was also an old school Yankee who believed if someone was stealing or damaging your property, you had every right to shoot him. It sounds a lot like my grandfather. I remember my grandfather telling stories about how when he was in the Pacific, he came across a tribe of Aborigines that still had tails. And same thing you were saying, we didn't know if he was losing his mind, if he'd really seen it, or if he was just being a prankster. But yeah, your Gramps sounds a lot like my Gramps. So it continued to set up at night. So he continued to sit up at night. But this time, instead of just using a spotlight, he had his deer hunting rifle with him. You probably know where this is going. After a few nights, Gramps shot the thief dead in the middle of the night. Wow. I just happened to come by on my bicycle the next morning and saw its body with my own eyes. Gramps had already dug a grave and was using his tractor to pull the body into the hole. He was bothered because he couldn't tell if the thing looked more like an ape or a human. Keep in mind, this was before there were all the TV shows and films on Sasquatch, so he probably wouldn't have even known about such a creature existing. I sure didn't. But looking back on it now, I know exactly what it was. Yep. To be clear, he wasn't bothered because he thought he killed the person. Your Gramps sounds like a bad man. He had taken many lives in the war, and killing a thief wouldn't have hurt his conscience much, if at all. He was more concerned that the police and/or scientists would catch wind of this, and he would end up in jail, or worse, to him, the center of a lot of attention. I totally get that. He wanted to get this thing in the ground quickly, and he did. Well, I can't say I blame your Gramps, you know. Wouldn't want to have the government poking around, you know, especially someone in their advancing age. Personally, I would love to get my hands on that Sasquatch to study him scientifically, him or her. But you know, I don't know that I would have done anything different back in the day. You know, times were different back then. But the story doesn't end there, Alice continues. Gramps could still get around pretty good for his age, and he liked to go out in the woods hunting. That fall, when he was deer hunting on the mountain behind his house, he was walking along a ridgeline when something caught his eye higher up the mountain. He scrambled further up the hill where there was a natural cave that cut back into the granite. All around the entrance to the cave were his missing carvings. Bigfoot was stealing his statues and bringing them back to his lair. I'd never seen this man cry before, ever. It just wasn't in his nature. But seeing those statues in the den of the creature he killed earlier that summer absolutely broke his heart. He came back from that hunting trip with giant tears running down the crags in his face. I'll never forget it. He was upset that he had killed the only living thing that appreciated his artwork. Wow, tragic. Gramps died that winter. Whoa, it gets worse. I've heard that people can die of a broken heart, and I think that's what happened. I recently went back to the lair, but the carvings have all rotted away by now, and there's no sign of any creature still living there as far as I can tell. Looking back on it, I think Gramps' carvings were so bad that perhaps Bigfoot thought they resembled his friends and family. It's tragic, really. Sincerely, Alice. Wow, that is definitely an interesting and a sad story, Alice. Like all the stories I'm going to read in these videos, it takes a lot of courage to come forward, so I appreciate you sharing. After I got this email, I followed up with Alice to see if I could go back to the home of her grandfather where the Bigfoot may be buried. You never know, there could still be bones there. Unfortunately, she told me the family home was bulldozed over, and they put in a bunch of condos now. So can't even get, there's concrete over where the grave site would have been. So if anything was there, it's been destroyed by humans' progress, which is another unfortunate, aspect of this story. But I do appreciate Alice sharing, and I hope everyone who's listened, if you do have stories similar to this, please, I encourage you to email them. I'm happy to share them with the audience watching, and honor your anonymity if you so choose, or if you want to come forward with your name, that's cool too. So thanks again. Hope you enjoyed this witness encounter from 603 Bigfoot. Thank you.